Welcome to another episode of the Trusted Advisor podcast and video series powered by the Retail Solutions Providers Association. Our goal on the pod is to accelerate the success of today's and tomorrow's leaders in the retail IT industry. I'm Jim Roddy, back with you again. Thank you so much for joining us. This episode of the Trusted Advisor podcast is sponsored by ScanSource. ScanSource wants to make it easy for their partners to find the right technologies to build complete solutions, close more deals, and even transition to the cloud. With the industry's most comprehensive selection of technology and a team that's second to none in the channel, VARs, agents, ISO, and ISVs can be assured they have access to the solutions that they need, the support and services they desire, and the tools to bring it all together. Whether your customers are in the restaurant, retail, healthcare, or grocery industry, ScanSource delivers uniquely qualified, tailored point-of-sale, barcode, mobile pay, mobile computing, and printing services to help you discover new opportunities and provide the total solutions they need. For more information, visit scansource.com/discover opportunity. That's scansource.com/discover opportunity. In this episode, we'll focus on self-service and the changing consumer with two members of the RSPA community. Fredrik Carlegren is the Vice President of Global Marketing for Toshiba Global Commerce Solutions. Prior to joining Toshiba 9 years ago, Fredrik worked in marketing for IBM for 11 years. His recent presentation at Retail Now, titled The Changing Consumer, Self-Service and the Bring It to Me Economy, helped spark this episode. Welcome, Fredrik. Thanks for sharing your insights with the RSPA community at the show and here today.
Thanks, Jim. Glad to be here.
Great. And for those not joining us on YouTube, those only listening on audio, you're missing out on the Toshiba studios. Where are you coming from, Fredrik? Where are you broadcasting from?
Yeah, we are live here in our Customer Innovation Center and studio in the North Carolina area. And we're glad to be here and glad to leverage our space for these kind of conversations and more.
Beautiful. Yeah, very nice. Thank you. Our second guest is a familiar name to avid listeners of this podcast because he joined us previously in episode 12. Blake Gillum is a general manager of DCR, a reseller based in Nashville. He started as DCR's director of marketing in 2010 before being named GM 4 years ago. Blake is active in the RSPA as a member of the RSPA Marketing Committee. Plus, he suggested to the RSPA for this year's Retail Now Community Give Back program to raise funds for the National Rescue Mission. And that we did thanks to the community in general, thanks to the sponsorship of Intel and APG Cashflow. RSPA recently donated $7,000 to the Nashville Rescue Mission. Blake, thank you very much for that. Thanks to you and your coworker Travis Hare for the suggestion, and welcome back to the podcast.
Hey, Jim. Thanks for having me on the show.
Sure, happy to have you back and happy to help the Nashville Rescue Mission for sure. Really appreciate you suggesting that and the community coming through. So, okay, so we're going to talk today again. The topic of our discussion is self-service and the changing consumer. So, Fredrik, tell us about the report that Toshiba and Payments.com produced. That's going to be the foundation for today's discussion. Give us a little bit of overview of what that is.
Yeah, sure, Jim. This has obviously been a very interesting time in many ways that we've gone through. And so last spring, we really wanted to start to look at what's happening with consumers, right? What are the changes and expectations that are coming out of or through this pandemic? And how is it really going to change shopping behaviors, patterns, expectations? Which ones are permanent and which ones maybe not so much, right? So we really wanted to get a pulse of that. So we did partner up with Payments.com. We actually did 2 surveys. We did one back in the spring timeframe around consumer engagement and what drives their purchase patterns and behaviors. And then we did a follow-up late summer, specifically around in-store and self-service, because we wanted to dig in a little bit more and understanding the role of self-service in this overall changing consumer expectations. So we did that. They're US-based surveys. The first one was just over 2,000 US consumers. The one we did in the summer around self-service was about 2,600 US consumers. So that's a little bit about it. I think the one takeaway that's really interesting is that some of retail's best customers are essentially up for grabs, and I think that's both a statement that should spark a little bit of that should spark something inside to say, well, what does that really mean, right? How do I ensure that I put in place as a retailer the technology, solutions, expectations to really hold on to your most valued consumers and what do we do as an industry going forward to ensure that we continue to live up to the expectations that are changing among the consumer shopping base. So we'll talk a little bit more about what that means today.
Yeah, the good news for VARs and ISVs are like, wow, everybody's up for grabs. And they're like, wait a second, my customers are up for grabs as well, right? You can go on offense and you got to play defense. So Blake, give us a little bit of background. Tell us about DCR's experience with self-service technology, besides as a consumer, right? How great do you see the demand, and what types of merchants have been most receptive to it from your perspective?
So of course, we deploy self-service technology to primarily the independent grocers and restaurateurs across the Southeast. So we have a very specific region with very specific demographics that we serve. But so in restaurants, we've primarily seen, a huge demand for online ordering because of the pandemic. Table-side ordering, also kiosks. In grocery, it seems to be a lot of self-checkout, little bit of online ordering in our area, but primarily self-checkout. And when they do go down the online ordering route, it's typically buy online, pick up in store, or curbside. Not significant demand for delivery just due to the cost. But the huge increase over the last couple of years, I think primarily changes in shopper behavior because of the pandemic. They're looking for convenience, speed, and that safety. And you've also got a whole new generation coming up, Gen Z, that has a tremendous amount of purchasing power that's getting more and more every year. And the image of that business, they need this technology to keep that image and to address some of the issues that the pandemic has caused, such as labor shortages.
Got it. Thank you. And when you're doing installs, are you installing a couple self-service checkout, or is it like, the Walmart where I'm in Northwest Pennsylvania, it converted before it had like 26, lanes. It like got rid of almost all those except for 2 and converted. What are you doing? Are you adding on a little bit of self-checkout, or are you just totally flipping what some of these independent grocers are doing?
So again, in our area, we're not seeing a whole flipping of removing those manned lanes. What we're seeing is them trying to accommodate a pot of 4, 6, or 8 self-checkouts, simply because a lot of our independent grocers, particularly the foundation of their existence is the customer service. And so they've kind of had to reframe how they think of customer service. And so pulling out those manned lanes would alienate some of their customer base, and I don't think they're ready to do that just quite yet.
Got it. Yeah, Walmart might be ready to reap the cost savings that they would have of flipping all that, but the independent grocers are going to be a little bit more focused on their customer service tradition. So, all right. So for our listeners and viewers, for our conversation today, what we're going to do is I'm going to ask Fredrik about some details from the Changing Consumer Report. Some of the things that jumped out to me. He'll share his perspective. Then we'll get Blake's perspective as a reseller who's tasked with advising merchants on these trends and then selling, installing, and servicing the related technology. So the first trend that we want to talk about, it's a combination actually of 2 trends. So first, shoppers' needs transform more to digital during the pandemic, while at the same time, retailers are struggling to find and retain labor. So Fredrik, first, does this mark a permanent shift to more self-service technology compared to where we were in pre-20 and 2021?
Yeah, that's really one of the key questions that we had going into the survey. So, I'll share what the data says rather than my own opinion. The overall, if you look at the landscape of the consumers, they said about 40% of the total consumer base shifted to become more digital, or digital first, if you will. And that's not strictly a definition of I'm going to buy everything online. It's also a way of even how they engage stores. Self-service plays into that. Things like having better access to inventory information in store. So there's several different examples, but it really means putting more content in the hands of consumers so they can determine how, when, and where they shop. Right. The question then of how permanent is that, 90% of those digital shifters, as we call them, say that is more or less permanent. They expect to continue to shop that way for the foreseeable future, and that they're not going to go back to the way they used to shop. I know I feel that way myself when I think about the patterns I have now versus what they were a year and a half, 2 years ago. So that's really part of it. And there's no question that safety, cleanliness, convenience, is a key part of that. And even if it means going back into the store, the consumers are really thinking differently about, I'll go into the store, but I'd rather spend less time there. And that comes back to things like, well, do I know if they have the item in stock that I want? Do they have the options to check out in the way that I want? Self-service playing a role in terms of doing that yourself, the perception that that's faster. So there's a lot of that change, and I do see it being permanent, even from the retailer's perspective, and how they're adapting to self-service. It comes into what you were just talking about with the labor shortage, right? And the need to really look at how you optimize labor in the store to provide the most value to the consumers. So I think you're going to see that. It becomes an interesting dynamic then when the pull from the consumer is sort of equal to the push that a retailer may have to want to move in a certain direction. And when those two line up, which they're kind of uniquely lining up at this point. And so that's what we're seeing in the information that we're getting from the report and the discussions that we have with retailers as well.
Great, thank you for that. So Blake, why don't you give us your take on this shift to self-service? What are you seeing when you're talking with your retailers about consumers continuing to embrace digital technology?
So it's very similar to what Fredrik was saying. I mean, the shift was coming. The pandemic simply accelerated its process. The pandemic gave consumers, retailers, restaurateurs, all of them a chance to really sit back, evaluate what they were doing, and think about how they were going to do it differently. So we see shoppers today, they're more familiar with technology than they've ever been. They're more comfortable with it, and they have different expectations. They have the information at their fingertip. They're used to getting instant gratification, and having that frictionless experience based on their shopping preferences is really something that they're coming to expect. And I think that gave retailers, restaurateurs, and everyone, I mean, from travel, every interaction you have with a customer has to change a little bit to meet those preferences because it's becoming something they expect, not just want anymore.
It's interesting you bring up travel because, yeah, when you go to the airport, for those who have been able to go in the last year and a half, you would almost be surprised if the airline didn't have you go to a kiosk first. That's now like a matter of course. Instead of getting in line, you're trying to find your spot at the kiosk. So, okay, so you see the trend moving. And one thing that kind of drives me crazy about when people look at trends is they overreact, right? The pendulum is swinging, but people like overdo it. I have somebody I remember who predicted in 2016, in 2026, there will be no more newspapers, no more printed magazines, everything's going to be digital. Now, obviously, newspapers and magazines have taken a huge hit, but it doesn't mean that everything is going to go that way. So I guess people do that the same from a retail standpoint, right? What we're talking about doesn't mean consumers have just flat out stopped going to stores. They might do more online, but that doesn't mean they shop exclusively online. So Fredrik, what's your take on that? What does the report have to say about that?
There's no question that at the end of the day, not only are there a variety of different consumers, consumers not a one thing, right? We broke it down. You look at by family status, other demographics. We talked about generationally. There's a lot of nuance as to what consumers and what kind of shopping trip are they they going out for? Is it just picking up a few items? Or are they going to do their weekly shopping? So you have to really break down and ultimately understand your consumer base and who you're really targeting when you talk about making self-service options available, right? That's obviously really, really important. We did ask, because we did want to see the other side of it. So why are consumers shopping online, for example, right? And it shouldn't be much of a surprise. Selection, the ability to search and confirm to get the best price, and then convenience, not having to leave your home, right? So that's why people generally shop online. I think we can all relate to that. So really turning it around and saying then, well, how do you start to take some of that and apply it to where retail and the stores are going as well? If you want to find selection, which was the #1 item there, then how are you giving your shoppers the opportunity to see what you have in stock in real time? How accurate is that? How available is that information? so that you're starting to take some of the capabilities that consumers really love about online shopping and bring them into the store environment. I think we're going to continue to see that be a really important conversation for retailers moving forward. And because at the end of the day, as you suggest, stores also have some very inherent advantages that consumers absolutely love, right? They love this idea of seeing selection and merchandising, of being able to touch and feel the quality of the goods that they're looking at and want to purchase. And then there's other factors like the immediacy too, right? Of I need dog food or cat food. This happened to me just last week, 10 o'clock on a Sunday night, and I had to run to the store, right? So those are some other variables. So I think the more the store can kind of embrace their inherent value and differentiation while continuing to add these other capabilities that consumers expect, that's going to make for a very interesting future and strengthen the store experience.
Great. And so what are you seeing on the front lines of this, Blake, in terms of when you're talking with your merchants? How are they responding to it? What data are they seeing? What guidance are you giving them in terms of in-store shopping habits versus online shopping habits and what they should do about it?
So of course we saw a huge upswing in online ordering, BOPIS, curbside, and delivery at about midway through the pandemic. I know we're still in it, but when everybody was really settling in that, hey, we may be in this for much longer than we were hoping. And so, we had a lot of our retailers, they implement these solutions. They start putting in the self-checkouts. They're taking the, measures for cleanliness and doing the wipe downs. And, everyone wanted it. Everyone was expecting it. And if you wanted to keep your customer base coming to you, you had to give them those options. Again, it's not just providing them that one way to shop. It's either pick one or the other. Shut down all your lanes and go all self-service, or go all, have all your lanes and do no self-service. That's just not an option anymore. You have to give them choices. So now what we're seeing, now keep in mind, we're in a very specific region with a very specific customer base, but we're starting to see some of our grocers who embraced more of the online ordering, pickup service kind of thing. They're kind of backing off of that now as the customers' shopping behaviors are beginning to change. They're with the labor shortage and all the other factors out there, the small, 3-4 lane mom and pop grocer has a really hard time justifying some of the labor demands that having someone on staff to pick and to be available to go out, and they're just trying to get someone at the back dock to accept DSD and bring in orders. So we've seen kind of a shift, but I do think, again, the moral of the story is you can't just have one flavor. You got to give them options and different ways to shop.
Got it. And I'd say, this is anecdotal, but I was in a Whole Foods north of Pittsburgh this past weekend, and you bump into shoppers. I was bumping into so many folks who were there, with their handheld, loading up the paper bag, for all the deliveries. And you go towards the front, they have all sorts of refrigerator space and all sorts of other space for that. That thing just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And also, I also ran into Cam Hayward, starting defensive lineman for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And if that means anything to anybody, and I can tell you what, I size up people. I'm like, could I take that guy? Could not take him. I'll tell you what, that was a big man, big strong guy there, and he was in the health section there, so he's eating right in order to stay strong for the Steelers. So, all right, one more question before we take a quick commercial break. So, Fredrik, when I watch your presentation at retail now, I got to watch it actually on demand through the RSPA Academy EXCELerate e-learning platform. So I was watching it, taking notes, and really nodding for the first 15 minutes, right? Everything that lined up, everything you said really lined up with what I've been seeing and reading and hearing. But the first time that I paused and I was skeptical was there was a stat from Gartner that said, like, by 2022, 85% of all customer service interactions will begin with self-service. And so that just made me think, like, that seems really, really high. So can you explain maybe the data and the application behind that statistic? Again, it seemed to be a significant shift compared to where we are today to where that study thought we were going to be. Again, that 85% number. What's the take? What's the explanation, please?
Yeah, when I was working for the preparation of that, my team, put that stat together, and I think I had a similar reaction to you, Jim. At first, it was like, wow, 85%. Yeah, that really just puts into context a much bigger set of much bigger view of self-service. That's not necessarily a shopping statistic as much as it is from an overall brand engagement and how you serve your customers. The idea that that individual is going to look for means that are self-service oriented to, contact the customer service center, get information about an order, returns, all throughout the entire process of how they engage, the when, where, and how they initiate that engagement, right, is really going to be on the terms of the individual. And so, that's a broader statistic. When you mentioned the airports just a little bit ago, I was kind of thinking about this statistic as well, and how far we've come. I was a self-checkout product manager many years ago, and I remember conversations back then too of, airport kiosks are starting to be put in place, hotel kiosks, right? And so the general notion of this continuing evolution and expectation and comfort, I think, Blake, to your point earlier, of consumers using technology, and they expect to have things at their fingertips that are easy and convenient to get information across the board. And that's really what that ties to.
Got it. Okay, so it's not every individual transaction. Like you said, travel, the first thing I do is start searching these sites for different things. That's all self-oriented. I'm not calling up a travel agent and they're running with it from there. So, right. Okay, well, thank you for that. And Blake, before we take a commercial break, what do you do when you hear that statistic? What do you do as a general manager of a VAR? What do you do organizationally? And what do you do from conversing with your merchants? What actions have you taken based on that data?
Well, I think you have to have real serious looks at your product line, your portfolio, and also really keep your ear to the tracks and try to hear what are these customers wanting, what are they expecting. I mean, that pendulum swing, it's absolutely happening. If you look at even fuel, this has already happened there. It went from full service stations to slowly now, if they ask you to go in and pay for your gas, it's like, well, that's insane. That's very inconvenient. So I think it's definitely coming. We've got some of our independent retailers who have put in just self-checkout, have seen between 45 to 50% of their customer base adopting these machines. And these are retailers who, for a long time, were very resistant to this. This is, my customer service, and, people shop with me because of the attention I give them. And so I definitely see it swinging into that 85% world is what the shopper wants. And you give people what they want if you want to stay in business.
Yeah, interesting you bring up the gas stations. I remember that as a kid, right? You used to show up and ding, ding, right? You'd run over that and somebody would come out and help you. You'd have to wait for them. That was normal to us, completely gone. But maybe down the road is in terms of, people used to go to a store and say, I wonder if they have it. Now you're able to check on your phone and check their inventory before you do that. So yeah, very interesting. I guess, and another, just a follow up to that, Blake, is do you make sure that your merchants are ready from an online standpoint and make sure they've got, as much on the channel as they can, because that's what the consumer is going to do. They're going to be looking to see what they have in stock and looking to see what they can do. Start the journey there. So you have to do better than just training your cashiers. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's really kind of, we're there to be their technical advisor and really give them the information they need to look at where they want their operations to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, and let them know what we see happening in the industry, what from a broader perspective and outside of just their customer base, what's coming down the pipe. That's why having great partners, in our vendors, Toshiba being an example, bringing that information to us helps us bring that information down to our customer.
Great, thank you. Well, let's take a quick pause to let you know the RSPA has launched the next generation of education for the retail IT channel with RSPA Academy EXCELerate. This online system offers continuous learning, training, and development opportunities anytime, anywhere, from any device. Included are these courses: retooling for revitalization in restaurants and retail, the blurring of the lines between stores and distribution centers, simplify and streamline payment acceptance. For more information on RSPA Academy EXCELerate, visit learn.gorspa.org. That's learn.gorspa.org. Also, we want to say thank you to our sponsors who support the RSPA and make this podcast and video series possible. Our platinum sponsors are Blue Star and Shift4 Payments. Our gold sponsors are Heartland and ScanSource. To receive the benefits of an RSPA membership or RSPA sponsorship, email membership@gorspa.org. All right, Fredrik, so I want to get your take on this. Part of what was holding back self-service was the appearance by the retailers, by the merchants, that it was going to eliminate jobs. But because there's such a labor shortage that's mostly been caused by the pandemic and lack of childcare and health situations and everything like that, that seems to really open the door for retailers to adopt self-service without getting any bad press from it, right? It's not, they put in this system and now they're laying off these people, right? You're installing and then you're able to, serve your customers better with retaining your number of staff. So, Fredrik, do you see that as a factor accelerating the adoption of self-service technology? Is that, we said earlier, the pandemic was an accelerant. Is the labor shortage sparked by the pandemic going to be accelerant for more self-service technology?
Yeah, it's like an accelerator on top of an accelerator, right? It's it really is that perfect storm in a way. There's no question there's been that storyline for a while related to self-service, but in our experience working with partners and customers, for the majority, they really is more of a conversation around labor optimization. But now when you put in the shortage crisis that we're seeing, of course, it's much more visible and obvious that self-service can help really participate in how a retailer can kind of solve that or try to solve that equation. I think if you flip the question over to the consumers and you say, what do you actually prefer, right? You're now seeing that shift too, right? You're seeing the preference shift. So in our survey, around 25% of consumers say they use self-checkout on a regular basis, but over 40% say that it would actually be their preferred method. So there was actually a gap in the availability, right, which is interesting, and that's a huge opportunity for those listening, is finding that gap because of the preference that we clearly see in the data for wanting self-service options. I fully agree with Blake. Ultimately, in almost all cases, it's a matter of choice. But if the choice is not there, that is going to impact the expectations that consumers have. So I do think all that coming together, I don't know if the whole, I think retailers still need to be cognizant of the fact that there is this undercurrent of what is the labor implication. I don't think anybody should dismiss that in communication and how you really roll out these solutions. I think that needs to be accounted for and thought through in your particular situation. But clearly, there's a lot of other variables in play now where I think I think it's going to be less of an issue from a PR standpoint.
Great, thank you for that. And Blake, I'm curious, when you're making the sale, talking to either current customers or prospects about selling them self-service technology, are you talking about labor optimization? Are you talking about filling in the gaps in their labor shortages, or is it both? How do you have that conversation? What's most effective?
Right now, it's 100% without a doubt, getting something there that can help push their customer base through a line. I mean, there's a huge labor shortage. No one's applying for their jobs. Those are, those who do, they no call, no show in a couple of weeks. Entry level wages were incredibly high in some regions, which when you compete against the unemployment, what that was paying, that was far beyond what they were offering for these entry level cashier jobs. And so they weren't getting applicants. And so, yeah, they're really struggling, especially some of these retailers in some of these more rural communities where there's not a huge population of people to choose from. You have to somehow attract the people in your community to come apply for this job and actually want to work it. And it was a real challenge for them. And we heard this across the board. So we saw a dramatic shift from their opinion that this technology reduces the customer experience, because they're like, well, I don't have anybody to work. What kind of experience is that for my customer? And so now they're using the technology to augment that experience with their customers. And so they're letting that technology provide, you know, the interaction that not only the customer wants, but it lets them use those limited resources they do have to really make those interactions best they can be in the environment that they find themselves working in.
Got it. So it's now a multiplier. The technology is multiplying the effectiveness of their team as opposed to shrinking the size of their team. Am I hearing you correctly on that, Blake?
Absolutely, because the size of their teams are shrinking due to external factors, at least in our area, fairly quickly. So.
Yeah, and I can just as a backdrop, I can say coast to coast throughout the United States, north to south, all the way up through Canada. This, you know, there is a labor shortage in every single walk of life, high paying jobs, right, low paying jobs, city, rural, and people are talking about, yeah, there are unemployment benefits, there's lack of childcare, there's people who don't want to do customer engagement anymore, right? They'd rather go work in a warehouse for an Amazon or a Walmart or something like that and get better pay and not have to deal with everything that's going on there. There's of course a lot of illness out there as well, right? A lot of families have been certainly upended. So a lot of different factors in there, but it sounds like technology can certainly be a help to these merchants and to their associates. So, all right, moving on to another trend in the survey. So, Fredrik, one thing that was cited in there, it said that over 80% of millennials and Gen Z and bridge millennials, they prefer self-checkout. I just have to note, I don't fit into any of those categories at all. I was just on a conference call earlier today with a couple coworkers, and they talked about a corner, and I said, nobody puts baby in a corner. And I'm like, don't you guys know that reference? And they're like, no. It's like, it's Dirty Dancing. That movie was, 1987. Oh my gosh, like you guys were toddlers back at that point. So I understand I don't fit into any of those things. And so do a lot of VARs don't fit into that area as well. They're over 50 like me. So just because, I might not prefer self-checkout or those VARs don't prefer self-checkout, that doesn't reflect the general trend. So would you say that's accurate, Fredrik? And so that these VAR executives have to say not just what fits for me, but really understand where the trend is heading for what's continuing to be the grower consumer base of these younger generations?
Yeah, there's no question that the younger generations have a affinity and a real desire to use self-service and have that be the primary way in which they engage. I'm going to look just so I don't get some of my stats wrong. 78% of bridge millennials use self-service to avoid long lines. 80% view it as faster from a millennials perspective. Gen Z, 86% prefer self-service, and 36% of that is due to privacy. Look, I got certain goods, I don't necessarily want anybody else to see what I have, but faster, seeing the price of every item, wanting to bag things yourself, right? Privacy, those are some of the top reasons. And interestingly enough, though, some of those are not unique to just the younger generations. Even baby boomers, etc. If you look at their preference for self-service, you're going to see some of those same things. You're going to see privacy, you're going to see bagging, you're going to see price and wanting to have control and understanding what the basket size and cost of items is, making sure that it's the right price. So you're going to see some of the same reasons, even if maybe the total skew towards preference is not as high for self-service. A lot of the reasons are. So I think that's quite quite interesting, and that's what some of the data shows us.
Yeah, you got to understand what's around the corner, not just what your personal experience has been or what you've experienced. So before I turn it over to Blake, Fredrik, did you get my "nobody puts baby in a corner" reference there? Did you?
I'm not that young. Yeah, I got you.
Okay, good. And Blake, did you get it? Did you know what movie that was from?
I did get it, but okay. Definitely fall in that under 50 crowd, though. So.
Good, yeah, okay. So then, well, thank you first. It's good to know. Good, because I have to watch myself and make sure my references aren't missing like everybody I'm talking to as the years go by. So I'm going to make a reference to the 1927 Yankees. People are going to be like, well, who were they? Moving on 100 years for that team. So Blake, again, you mentioned you're not an over 50 VAR executive, clearly under 50. What's your take as someone who doesn't fit into that category of over 50 as a VAR executive? How are you approaching this in order to make sure you're keeping up with what's around the corner?
Well, I think, Fredrik said it right. You got to look outside of your personal preferences. You got to look at the data, and you got to listen to your customers and build solutions to meet their needs. I get it. I prefer self-checkout, many for the reasons Fredrik had said. I like setting my own pace. It feels faster. It's probably not. I know I don't, scan those items as quick as a cashier would. But it makes me feel like the pace is moving quicker, and I like to make sure that my items are ringing up correctly. So, I can, I don't have to go wait over at the customer service line after I get my receipt to queue up again and get something fixed. But I think, it's real easy as a VAR, as an ISV, as any solution provider to fall into the trap of trying to develop solutions that your clients and customer base need. They need it. It's your opinion they need it. Then you have to go out there and sell them on why they need it, as opposed to developing solutions based on the data, based on what they're telling you, based on what they're already telling you they want. Craft a solution for that, and the sell's much easier. So that's kind of the approach we try to take, is to step outside of what we prefer and build what people are asking for.
Yeah, don't fight gravity. Go along with gravity. Go ahead, Fredrik.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up. Another thought I had there is, of course, as vendors, solution providers, and VARs, right, we got to continue to also look at how we make this easier from a consumer experience perspective, right? That's on us, and continuing to innovate and find those different ways to leverage new technologies, right? So, whether it's computer vision, and for example, one of the key inhibitors to speed and also therefore to not use self-checkout is often produce, right? That's cited in the survey as well. Well, if I got a lot of produce, I'm going to be more hesitant. With some of the things we're doing now with computer vision, we're taking every produce item and cutting that time in half and making it much more intuitive. So we have to continue to evolve how we deploy this and look at the voice of customer or voice of consumer and really have that drive where we go. And I think we're just going to continue to find new ways to address the pain points, as well as really accelerate the reasons why people already love self-service.
Yeah, and I'm glad you bring that up. Whenever my wife, we're in the store and she says, get bananas, I get the bananas, put them in a bag, and then I go over and punch in the code to put the label on them. Well, she doesn't do that. She just goes to the self-checkout and you start typing in what the produce is, BAN, and then it gives up all the options and you just quickly press it. I'm like, well, that's far more convenient than me going like, is it 4011? Like, am I typing this in correctly? So yeah, the technology is certainly making it a lot easier for people to embrace self-service. I'll catch up eventually, I'm sure. So, all right, a couple more questions. So Fredrik, you also noted in your Retail Now presentation, you said self-service is more than checking out. So what do you mean by that? What are the other opportunities in what you call the bring it to me economy that maybe we haven't touched on yet?
Yeah, glad you brought that up. The bring it to me economy, we touched on a little bit before, and Blake mentioned things like curbside, buy online, pick up in store. Those are journeys and experiences that consumers have become familiar with. Although, interestingly on those, the data that we got through the survey shows that the buy online, pick up in store actually was probably the least preferred. I think the interpretation of that data being, if I've already decided I'm going to buy it online, then don't make me go into the store. I'd rather do curbside or delivery, right? So I think consumers are still trying to figure that out a little bit of when exactly they want to have a certain experience. But there are other things on the horizon that I think we have to keep an eye on as an industry, right? Which is not just delivery, but subscriptions, right? Renewals for certain items. I think we probably all do that to some degree for things that we know we have a certain volume or usage on in a given month or a week. So those are other examples of what customers are really looking at. The key, I think, for us and for our clients is to make sure that we drive value for the retailers in terms of how they deliver that. Because consumers are ultimately going to look for and find what's the easiest access for me to get this. And in some cases that could be direct to manufacturer, right? And so that value add that retailers bring in the overall shopping experience and journey is something that we'll be working very closely on and following the consumer's needs and expectations around.
Got it. Yeah, focusing on the entire journey, not just that end point. So, and Blake, we've touched on this a little bit, but I think a lot of folks can comprehend like the VAR's role in a self-checkout, right? You sell it to them, you service it, you install it, all those kind of things. What role are you playing with your merchants in what Fredrik was talking about, that early on portion of it where they're doing the online shopping? How do you fit into that? How do you complement it? How do you drive it? If you can paint a picture, if you don't mind.
Well, we provide a full solution for our retailers, and so we're involved in really pretty much every piece of that. And I think it's really important as a VAR to, you got to pair up with the right people. So partner with the right hardware, software vendors. You got to be able to identify needs, figure out whether you have to bring a third-party integrator in to some third parties. It's just listening to your customer. Helping coach them through the process and how do they meet, and adapt to these changes in customer preference. And I think the first step is always, just sitting down, trying to look at your customer base and figure out what do they want. We've even seen some retailers go as far as creating little surveys, little check boxes. Here's 3 things. What's important to you? Hand that out to their customer base to kind of help start planning a roadmap of where they want to go. Of course, some of these retailers don't have the big box store budgets of having huge lines of coolers up front and having 20 people dedicated to picking and delivering and curbside, and trying to just really be their advisor and coach. And how do we get to where you want to be in the budget that you have, and being there to support, sell it, install it, support them, and be their partner for the long term on all these solutions.
And if you don't mind me asking, have you been able to do all this through third party, right? We see some VARs who are adapting to become VAR ISV hybrids, where the customization is they have in-house developers or working with developers because the vendor, won't make that adaptation in the software. What path have you gone down, if you don't mind asking, in terms of be able to play more on the front end than just a checkout in this trend?
So we are a VAR ISV hybrid. We are one of those hybrids, and we kind of make that determination based on a case-by-case basis, right? There's a time when in-house development makes sense. You have to look at, who else can use this for? Do they have the budget to pay for it? So what can we do? And then sometimes it's, let's not spend a lot of time, resources, and money reinventing the wheel. There may be a third party or a vendor out there who already does this very well, and that's the path of least resistance to get this solution into our partners, our customers' hands. And ultimately, that's who we serve, is our clients. And so we usually make that decision based on the unique needs of each one of our retailers. We can be a little nimble in that way because of our size, I guess, for better or worse.
Got it. Thank you for that. And that's one trend that we're definitely seeing. We saw it in the POS channel KPI study that the RSPA produced earlier in 2021. A lot more VARs shifting to that VAR ISV hybrid model. And now inside the RSPA membership, 20% of our members are an ISV or an ISV VAR hybrid, right? So 1 out of every 5, where before it was, the RSPA was all dealers, and hardware vendors. You can really see that metamorphosis happening at a macro level, and then just walking around the retail now show floor, way more folks doing that. And again, add DCR to the list of VARs who are moving forward that way. So, all right, last question, Fredrik, just want to be wide open here. What didn't we talk about today from the report that you feel is important for our audience of VARs and ISVs and VAR ISV hybrids to understand?
Yeah, I think maybe just a couple of points. One, back to that, statement I made in the beginning that some of the retailers' most valued consumers are up for grabs, right? And the data, it talks about female, affluent, family. These are the digital. These groups are driving the digital shift, and it's really important that we keep our perspective and eye on that data. But ultimately, as I said already once, make sure you understand the voice of your consumer, your shoppers is really fundamental, and make sure that they're aware of the journey that you're on to deliver better customer experience and how this fits into the overall experience that you are looking to deliver for them. The final piece is, work with people like Blake and his team who really know on the ground what it takes to implement this successfully, right? I've seen clients who implement essentially the same technology and get vastly different results. Some of that could be, again, back to the consumer base and how you've rolled it out, how you've communicated. In other cases, it's configurations in the system or how it's staffed and manned, how you're helping consumers through the early stages of learning the system and guiding them through certain interventions that are required in the system. But operationalizing it and getting that off the ground early, is sometimes not at all about the technology. It's really about the expertise that VARs have and have developed. So leverage that. That would be my final piece of advice.
Great, and that's what I was going to ask you for advice. Also, like, what actions do you think VARs should take? I'm going to ask Blake the same question, but Fredrik, it sounds like what you're saying is, I love the phrase, there's no substitute for a competent person getting closer to a situation. That's what it sounds like you're saying to resellers. They've got to make sure they get really close to what's going on inside of their merchants so they can align them with the best technology and services. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, absolutely, right? Yep. I mean, definitely become an expert in the technology, because some of it does involve setup configurations and different tools that vendors like Toshiba provide that are available. But beyond that, it's really best practices around how to implement it and how to get the consumers comfortable and confident in how they use the technology. And that's what's really going to drive success.
Great. A mentor of mine used to say, to guess is to gamble. Right, so don't be guessing. Hug the facts. Get a sure thing or a more sure thing in the business world. All right, Blake. Final words from you. What recommendation would you have to a reseller based on everything that we've talked about? What 1 or 2 actions do you recommend they take going forward?
So, of course, self-service isn't going away. It's absolutely here to stay, 100%. And here we're constantly researching new ways to use technology to provide solutions to real world business needs. Again, listening to what your partners, your customers, your clients are actually asking for. We highly recommend choosing the right hardware, software partners. We're partnered with Toshiba. They've done a fantastic job helping giving us information to take back to our clients, pairing that with in-house development, and then knowing when to partner with the right third-party solutions and when to integrate that to craft unique solutions for our customers. And I think as a VAR and ISV, if you're not looking at what your customers' customers want, how they want to interact with their environment, and what your customers need to provide that experience, then you're missing out on a tremendous opportunity, and someone's going to come take that opportunity from you.
Amen. Well said. Well, that does it for this episode of The Trusted Advisor. We hope you enjoyed our discussion. If you did, be sure to subscribe to the RSPA YouTube channel and the Trusted Advisor podcast so you never miss an episode. We'd also appreciate it if you'd rate us wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Regular listeners know my personal philosophy is the more stars, the better. And if you'd like to learn more best practices for VARs and ISVs in the retail technology industry, check out the RSPA blog. You can find it at gorspa.org and then clicking on RSPA blog. Before we go, big thanks again to Fredrik and Blake for sharing their wisdom with us today. Gentlemen, that was great information, great statistics, great research, great real world advice for VARs and ISVs. Thanks also to RSPA Marketing Manager Chris Arnold for his production work, Joseph McDade for our music, and last but not least, thanks so much to you for listening. Our goal at the RSPA is to accelerate the success of our members in the point of sale ecosystem by providing knowledge and connections. For more information, visit our website at gorspa.org. Thanks for listening, and goodbye, everybody.